Hey everyone, welcome back to Bottled Up. I'm your host, Andrew Allen. Today, I'm joined by the co-founders of CTR Response, a sharp boutique digital agency based in Southern Alabama. Ryan Meisch, a Chicago film school grad turned sales powerhouse, and Clay Tyler, an Alabama native who grew up geeking out on computers before mastering digital advertising. Their partnership is the classic opposites attract story. A Yankee with a cinema background meets a Southern tech tinkerer, and together they launch a forward-thinking agency, smack in the middle of the COVID pandemic. We're diving into how their entertainment and tech roots shape smarter digital marketing, the massive shifts happening in advertising right now, why transparency and data are non-negotiable, and practical tips for small businesses that want to dominate online. So pop open your favorite Pepsi product and let's jump in. Today, my very special guests are Mr. Ryan Meisch.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having us.
And Clay Tyler.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Okay, so Ryan and Clay, you guys are the co-founders of CTR. It's a digital agency that operates out of Southern Alabama. I'm very, very excited to have you guys on the show to kind of get into the ins and outs of how advertising has changed, how digital marketing is now kind of like taking over everything else, with people streaming and kind of unplugging from cable and that kind of thing. So before we get into all of that and kind of the origin story of y'all's company, I would like to kind of go in a little bit of your history. So I think, Ryan, we'll start with you. Where did you grow up, Ryan, and what were you kind of interested in as a kid?
Yeah. And first off, Andrew, thanks for having both Clay and I. We were excited and tickled that you you had reached out for this. So excited to be here. My origin story. So I guess with everyone here being from the South, I guess I'm considered the resident Yankee. So I originally grew up in just outside of Chicago in a southern suburb called Frankfort, Illinois.
Okay.
And as a kid, video games, sports, kind of growing up, got into dirt bike racing, motocross.
All right.
So I was kind of all over the board in terms of, what I was interested in as a kid. I mean, I'm extremely social, so I always wanted to blend in with all the different crowds growing up. So I think that may be why I had a hand in a lot of, different spaces. But from there, my family actually moved us from the south side of Chicago up to a northern Illinois city called Rockford, Illinois. And that's where I wound up going to high school. When I got into high school, I'll be honest, when I was about a junior, I was really trying to figure out like, all right, got to start looking for, what am I going to go to school for? I mean, I always knew I was going to go to college, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My father is in finance, so I was thinking about going the business route. But my best friends, Andrew, were all in the art scene. They were all very successful musicians, actually. And so I kind of, during high school, grew up going to shows and hanging out with them. And so I kind of went through this art phase of my life and decided that I was going to go to film school and try and make it as a director, writer, producer. And fast forward to my senior year of college, I quickly realized, having seen some of my other colleagues go on to, Los Angeles and try and make it in the business, that they were very miserable and poor. And I definitely didn't want that. So I graduated college with a film degree and wound up getting into sales and started a path down selling advertising for a local television station in Rockford.
Okay. It's very interesting that you were looking to be, on the artsy side of things, and then you fell into the sales side of things.
Yes.
I think that having someone who has that kind of taste behind their selling, where they look at something more, they're not just looking at it as like, hey, I'm just get out and sell. They actually care about what they're looking at and what they're selling, because they actually, have that artistic lens behind it, is an interesting thing. So, well, Ryan, we'll get into when you actually made your way down to where we are now in the South. But before we do that, I want to kind of get Clay's story. So Clay, I know a little bit about your story. So tell me, where did you grow up? What were you kind of into as a kid? And how did you kind of make your way into the world that you and Ryan found yourselves in?
Yeah, man, I got to tell you, I really had to control myself from laughing out loud on a microphone because a Yankee with a film degree found a redneck from Alabama and started a digital company down here.
Great. Yeah, it's great. It's like a storybook.
That's what, but to summarize, where I grew up, I mean, I grew up in a very, very rural town in North Alabama. I mean, like I said, like we were talking before the show, 2020 U.S. Census Bureau had us at 412 people, I think, still just living in Elkmont, Alabama.
Lordy.
So we weren't in the most, as you can imagine, not the most technologically developed area of the country or even the state for that matter. But I'll tell you, for me, it had a lot to do with my grandfather. My grandfather was very much into technology and bought me my first computer, encouraged every silly hobby that I had. I mean, throughout high school, you would go downstairs to his little workshop down there, and he was either taking apart a computer or putting something together, whatever sparked his fancy, and I just kind of went, right along with it. Fast forward a little bit, I ended up at Troy University and was a major in broadcast journalism there with a contract in advertising. And, the funniest thing about going there, or especially being a part of the journalism program, it was the only place on campus where I guess you would call it the university computers were MacBooks.
Yeah,
And
that's a big deal.
funny enough, like that was a strangely large draw for me because I was I always loved those platforms better than anything we operated on with Windows. And the head of that department was Dr. Pageant, and he was just a marvel to speak to. I mean, I loved getting his insight about, what was going on in the world, how he viewed the world. He had a son that worked at Google. So I loved I interacted with him twice. So it was good. It was fun to hear that side of it too, and where they kind of saw the world going. So as I moved down here and started my career in digital advertising, I always went back to the things that they said. And goodness, how it still blew my mind how forward thinking they were and how fortunate I was to meet them at Troy. Because sure enough, it was almost, Nostradamus-esque of
Yeah.
things that started to happen. And yeah, I mean, I was incredibly fortunate to be able to learn from them and be that redneck that came from a small town who got to experience all that. And it was just all lucky, my grandfather's influence to then who I met at Troy. And then, yeah, led me to the Yankee with the film degree a few years later.
Well, there's always anytime that you have a guy, yeah, there's yin and yang, right? Like a lot of times the best teams are the ones that fill in the gaps where the other guy has voids, right? So I think that outside looking in and spending a few amount of time with you guys, I think that's kind of where you complement one another, where, Ryan does things better than you, Clay, and Clay, you do things better than Ryan in certain respects, and you all fill in the gaps. So both of y'all kind of, Ryan, you kind of had the itch, like I'm gonna go into Hollywood. I'm gonna make things, right? Like I'm gonna write, I'm gonna direct, I'm gonna get involved. And then you actually kind of saw that some of the people who were following down the same path you were following down were not having the success at a rate that you were comfortable with. So you decided to kind of pivot a little bit. So what was it like coming in to working at that first television station in Illinois, Ryan?
Ooh, yeah. I'll tell you, I'm a social person. So being in a sales role, I was very comfortable with, but selling air is hard to do.
Yes.
I mean, that's essentially what you are doing at a television station or a radio station. I was fortunate to work at both, so I got to see kind of both of the older mediums. And really, what was the biggest struggle for me is I didn't believe in it. And so I felt terrible pitching and selling it to the clients or customers that I was trying to develop relationships with, right? Because very quickly in this business, the only thing that, we truly have is our reputation. And the moment that gets diminished, it's, game over. And so the on-air product is what I didn't, fully believe in. Digital, however, I gravitated towards just because of the transparency and the attribution that you could provide back to, clients. And so while I was in television, I was very much had both feet in both sectors, right? Obviously, the primary job was to sell ads on air on the local television station, but you also had the digital product. But I was gravitated more towards that, just again for the transparency aspect of it. And so from there, I was successful in the sales role, but I was in a small market, Rockford, Illinois. The DMA is, gosh, I think it's 135, very, very small DMA. And so in order to increase your income, you needed to get into larger markets, talk to larger advertisers that had, larger budgets. And so I actually wound up moving to Chicago and working for the CBS radio affiliate, or CBS in Chicago. And that's really where my foray into like digital advertising really took off, because it
Ryan,
was,
what time frame was this?
yeah.
Because
So
it,
2012 was when I was when I started my sales career at the television station, and I was only there for a year. So
okay.
in 2013, then I moved to Chicago to work for CBS.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because I've kind of been in the game since about 2009.
Hmm.
And when every year we have meetings with all of our ad agencies, or with all of our, television reps, radio reps, and the whole digital side was kind of like rumbling underneath, right? Like
Yeah.
this is something that I remember there was one year where everyone came in and now everyone's a digital ad agency, right?
Hmm.
Like radio's selling digital, out of home selling digital, cable news is selling digital. So like now everyone's selling digital. But before that, it was very specialized. And how big of a piece of the pie was this in like 2013 when you went to Chicago?
So yeah, in terms of, yeah, the digital slice, if you will, of the
Right.
overall revenue.
Yeah, like not super specific, but like in your opinion, like were was the fact that you were really, really gung ho about it a more of a benefit to the higher ups at that station because it was kind of an emerging brand?
Certainly,
That's
certainly.
kind of what I would figure it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, CBS was trying to, improve their digital footprint with their on-air products, the radio, right? And that transformation to, start pushing everything into the streaming side of their business. So yeah, 100%. And funny enough, I still, even though I kind of saw it going in that direction, I was still very, very ignorant to like what all it could do, right? I mean, I was a sales guy, so I was only taking the top end features and benefits and then taking that to my clients, right? And it
Yep.
wasn't until I eventually met Clay where my eyes were now wide open on the possibilities that these products could do for clients.
Well, Clay, let's go into your first gig. So you graduate from Troy, and where did you go after that?
I graduated from Troy and moved down to Fairhope, Alabama, and started working for a company called On Media, which was
Okay.
the cable advertising sales down here in on the Gulf Coast. And gosh, Andrew, talking about the people that you meet at On Media, I had an incredible sales manager there who, gosh, you gotta understand, this was my first job when I was 21 years old. And boy, howdy, did I think that I thought I knew a lot, and it turned out I knew very little. And at least about just advertising in general, but also like the perceptions of advertising for small business owners and things of that nature. I mean, it really was eye-opening to see how important work experience was inside of this area. But I had an incredible sales manager who, again, incredibly technically savvy. I'll be honest, I think I got the job because he and I talked about iOS and Apple's ecosystem for about half of my interview with them. Extremely tech savvy. He and
So
I,
you got the job because y'all were both fanboys.
exactly. I kid you not. So I at the time had downloaded, oh my gosh, I want to say it was like iOS 7 back in the day
It's like
as a beta.
snow leopard.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah, I had a beta loaded on my iPhone, like the beta of the OS, and he thought
Yeah.
that was the coolest thing ever. And like literally was just showing him in the interview like the beta of that iOS that I had preloaded onto my phone. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. I don't know if you can
I
preload
don't I
betas
don't
to
I don't know.
iOS.
You probably could, but I have no idea, honestly.
But yeah, well, I mean, we talked about that for the half of the meeting, and then I just remember the general manager at the time after he had told her like, "Hey, I'm going to hire this kid the first meeting I ever had with her, she was like, it was like, you're 21, you've never done this before. And I was like, no, but I feel like I can learn on my feet. But so, had that incredible manager there. Obviously, I had all kinds of digital background. It probably wasn't 6 months later or a few months later, On Media had partnered with an external digital company that serviced everything. I mean, Google, from Google Ads to social media to any programmatic solutions that were available out there. And that was where, right then and there, is where I kind of took off.
You had the aha moment.
Yeah, and I was like, and it was my opportunity too. This was everything that I wanted to be doing, and now, On Media had provided access to be able to learn more, and then also be able to implement it. So, man, yeah, from there it was just all downhill from there. I mean, after that, ended up working for Nexstar down here, met Ryan at WKRG, and I think us meeting was a big aha moment for both of us.
Do you remember the first time you met Ryan?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great
yeah.
story.
What
Great
was
story.
that
Well,
like?
okay, there's two
Well,
parts.
hold on. Before we get into that, I want to get to where Ryan is there. Ryan has made it down. So Ryan, you're in Chicago. How do you make it down to the Gulf Coast?
Yeah. So I got then at the time working for CBS Radio, I had a former colleague who became the director of sales for a Nexstar station in Rockford, Illinois. My first station that I worked for as a seller called me and said, "Hey, do you want to get into management?" He's like, "I got an opportunity for a local sales manager job. Would you like that?" And here I am. I'm like, I was like, I know I can sell. So worst case scenario, if I'm a terrible manager, I just go back into selling. So wound up taking that job. So moving back from Chicago back to where I grew up, or, graduated high school, working for Nexstar, did that for about 3.5 years. And then in 2017, Nexstar bought Media General, which owned, a handful of stations around the country, primarily in the Southeast, and got the opportunity to interview for the general sales manager position for the local CBS affiliate in Mobile, Channel 5, WKRG. Got that position. And before you know it, Andrew, here I'm dragging my wife to Alabama, and you could imagine us.
How was that pitch, by the way? How was that set?
Well, Andrew, it helps to put a ring on the finger prior to breaking the news to her that we're
Absolutely,
moving.
100%.
So, yeah. So wound up getting engaged and then interviewing for that position shortly after, and then obviously getting the job. And so she, like myself, who had never been to the true South, right? Never been to the true South.
Right.
I don't constitute Orlando, Florida as the South. So
No.
So yeah, you can imagine both of us had these, scenes of deliverance floating in our
lots
heads
of bare feet. There's lots of bare feet everywhere.
But man, as soon as she saw the beaches down here, she was sold immediately. And yeah, in 2017 of July is when I started at WKRG.
How has living down here? Would y'all ever move back?
Oh gosh, no. I love it down here. In a weird way, it reminded me of where I grew up and went to high school. I too came from a smaller community in a small town. Like I graduated with 50 kids in my high school. So
yeah, that is small.
It was easy for me to adjust to, the culture down here. My wife, it took a little bit for her to she's a, city girl, fast talker. So it took a little bit for her getting used to, but man, I would never move back. I love it here.
Good. Well, so now you're both working for WKRG, and Clay, describe the first time you remember meeting Ryan.
Well, so Ryan becomes general sales manager, right? And Ryan kind of undersells that. He now has become the most popular kid in the schoolyard at KRG. So everybody from the news side to the sales side is walking through his doors there at the office. And everybody is trying to placate for something. Everybody's trying to do this. And I remember, I think the few words we had said to one another, he had mentioned that he was just a fiend for golf, loved golf. So didn't say, I wasn't going to be the one that was just barreling down his doors to be like, hey, here's me.
Yeah, you got to play it cool, man.
Yeah, I got to play it. So all I did was, I think I found an article online. It was like Baldwin County's golf courses. I printed it out, put it in an envelope, and threw it on his desk at some point. And then later that day, he had walked in and Ryan, I'm trying to remember where the rain, where I drove you home that time in the rain. I can't remember if it was after that day where you walked in. It was like, hey, it was like, I need a ride home. If you, I know you live in Fairhope, and I need a ride home. He's like, can you take me to Fairhope? And B, he's like, we're going to talk about this envelope.
Yep.
So yeah, I drove home and I mean, when I say it was raining, I drove Ryan home. I don't remember why Ryan didn't have a vehicle at the time, but drove Ryan home in the rain, talked to golf pretty much from Mobile all the way back to Fairhope. And yeah, that was kind of when, I remember going home and telling my wife, I was like, man, I really like the way this guy thinks. I have, Andrew, you had mentioned earlier, you talk about like strengths and weaknesses between both of us and how we kind of
Yeah.
pick each other up in a lot of cases. I have never been, and I still don't consider myself there, but I have never been the more entrepreneurial or business-minded individual. That is something that, for all the technical skills that I have, that is one gap that I had. And Ryan had a lot more insight to it from, with his dad and where he was in Morgan Stanley and being able to glean information off him, but also, his things that he learned with his time as management with CBS and et cetera. But yeah, I mean, it all started with a manila envelope. And when I tell you that it was raining hard that day on the drive home, by the way, I white knuckled that drive all the way home to Fairhope. And I just remember trying to juggle like, hey, I really don't want to kill
Die.
this general sales manager, yeah, that we just met and I'm starting to build a friendship with. Really don't want to die in a wreck, right now. But at the same time, would love to carry on this conversation. So yeah, started there. Played golf that weekend at one of the courses from the Manila envelope. And yeah, I mean, it was all downhill from there. I mean, it was all just kind of one thing inevitably rolled over after the other.
So Ryan, you're coming in, you're lifting up your whole life from the Midwest to
Yep.
Come down to the South, which, I've talked to a few people, I've interviewed a few people about what it's like moving from, the center of the state of Mississippi to the coast. I've talked to people who have come from other parts of the country down to the Gulf Coast. And so what was going through your head when you started at this new place, new culture? What was kind of going through your head about like, all right, what am I going to do? And what did you think about Clay the first time you met her?
Oh yeah. So getting in there, funny enough, I was so close, Andrew, to actually leaving the industry and going and taking my Series 6, Series 7 license to go work for my father in the finance industry. And got this opportunity and, talked it over with my father. And he's like, listen, he's like, just do it for 2 years. If you don't like it, then we'll have another conversation about it. So took it, got down here. And when I first met Clay, I can tell you right now, I knew literally the first time we played golf together, we had inevitably started talking about business and I was picking his brain because he was the digital sales manager. And so obviously I was very interested in that and really wanted to grow that sector for WKRG. Like I knew that was the path forward. And very quickly, I realized that Nexstar, the company that owned KRG, had no idea who they had sitting in that role as a digital sales manager.
Yeah.
And Clay, I think it was like 3 weeks after we were there that I asked you, would you ever consider going out on your own and starting your business? It was
actually that day we played at Rock Creek. We went to a second. So I introduced Ryan to some friends. We went to a second restaurant after we played there. And I remember Ryan sitting down at that bar thinking, if you ever even contemplate leaving, he's like, you better tell me immediately. I mean, literally, we had known each other for about, Ryan, probably 3 weeks total, maybe 3 weeks total.
And
Well,
so,
I mean, it's very interesting that, well, first off, Ryan, you kind of saw the writing on the wall on the way that things were going.
yes.
And you kind of predicted where we are now with, digital being, a large portion of people's advertising buys are all going to be digital, because you mentioned it in the earlier part of the interview that it's something you can quantitate and bring back to the customer and say, hey, this is working, this is not working, we need to tweak this, that. There's data attached, right?
Yeah.
It isn't just, oh, hey, this many people say they saw it, or like it's or people are filling out surveys for $7 and sending them in. Like, it's literal data. So when you and Clay basically got together and were like, okay, I could definitely see myself working with this guy. We kind of jive, number one, with a friendship and the way our minds work, but also you could see the quality of the character of you two. And I think that finding someone who Clay's technical ability and then your kind of business savvy sales mind, putting those two things together kind of creates a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I think that how long did you guys work together before you realized and you're like, hey, I think we're about to jump off this cliff together?
I think it was that day we started putting plans together, Andrew, of starting a business and just what would that look like, right? Starting very small, just, literally on a notepad of like, what could this, look like? And so we started to formulate, a business plan, if you will. And this would have been throughout 2017 into 2018. Well, things started to pick up at the television station. I mean, Clay was doing a phenomenal job. Our sales team was doing a phenomenal job. And so things were heading in the right direction. And with that success came, some bonuses that we enjoyed for our success. And that's what we were brought in to do, was to turn around that station. And so between that, having children,
As I say,
it kind
the
of,
kids played a big part in that too.
yeah, it
Ron
slowed
and
the
I like
roll.
perfect. We always, it seemed like all one of us was having a kid every other given time. We staggered them almost perfectly.
Yeah. So we worked towards, I mean, it was to form CTR, it took, basically 3 years that over a 3 year period to finally, decide that we were going to do it. And when we decided, I'll never forget it. It was in the height of the pandemic. I believe it was summer of 2020. And Clay came right into my office, shut my doors and said, we got to go now. We got to do this now. And I looked at him, bug-eyed, like, are you kidding me? We're in a never before seen part of history, and you want to go start a business right now? And man, when I tell you the conviction that he had walking into my office, I told him 3 years earlier, you let me know when you want to go and I'll go. And we were off to the races. That July, that summer, we put everything in motion.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
no, go ahead, Clay. I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say, that speaking of that moment when I walked into his office, I mean, it was I always look back at that time period back in 2020 with the pandemic as it was the great accelerator. I mean, and you could see, Andrew, you made a comment earlier, and that was the term that we used too, which was, seeing the writing on the walls. That was the writing on the walls getting outlined in Christmas lights kind of moment. I mean, things were moving in the direction that they were going to move in about 7 years. And we collapsed about 7 years worth of progress into about 8 months there. So, I mean, that I was like, listen, if there is a part of this, if we need to get on this tidal wave at any point in time, it's got to be now, because the industry was going to get shifted into overdrive, and I did not
100%.
want to miss this time of innovation that was about to happen. And sure enough, we're still. I would have never imagined it would have still been going on, but we are still in a heavy period of innovation that, funny enough, people look at the pandemic as having a lot of negatives, but that is the one positive I think came out of the pandemic is this industry in particular, technology in particular, saw kind of a thrust into the future. So yeah, Ryan recalls that moment just like that. I mean, I was like, hey, it's about to start. So we're either on the bus or off the bus.
Since you're both working at the same place, you both obviously they probably had some kind of restrictions on you guys when it comes to non-competes and the like. So what was that like, if y'all can talk about that?
Well, it was kind of one of those things where, we played with it for so long that it was like we honestly wondered if, we could even do it. And I think Ron and I both had moments there where we were looking at other opportunities and thinking, I don't know if we can pull this off. Well, it's going to be one of those things where it happens. But I think he and I both ended up coming back full circle and be like, no, we got to commit to this. I think it's what we both want to do. So, we handled that exit as best we could. One thing I'll say is that, while we were there, we worked with some incredible people, and we never wanted to do anything that damaged our, that what they were trying to accomplish there at the time. And I think we navigated that pretty well. I mean, we, like I said, worked with some incredible people, and they still are some incredible people. So yeah, we navigated those non-competes as best we could until our time expired. And even afterwards here, being on the other end of that, I still think very highly of everybody that we worked with, and would
Well,
never say
what
any ill
what
will toward them.
whenever you guys decided to start your own company, what made y'all think of calling it CTR Response? Like, what was the
Ryan,
what?
take it away. That's
So obviously through this process, Andrew, there was, because of what you just got done, discussing non-competes and et cetera, we had to be very secretive on how we communicated after we decided that we were going to put the plan in motion. And so, I walked into his office because, we were going to have to officially, register, the business. And I was like, man, we got to think of a name. And so I sat in Clay's office and I was like, CTR Response. I literally just off the cuff, CTR Response. Because, CTR is a metric in our industry, click-through rate, right?
Yep.
But it also could stand for Clay, Tyler, Ryan. So that honestly is what we went with. Clay was like, yeah, I'm good with it. Let's go ahead and register that.
I mean, it was not a second thought. Literally, just I was like, sounds great.
I
Let's
mean,
go.
it is kind of interesting that, yeah, not, initials aside, that it basically does kind of explain what you're doing and using the metric of a click-through rate. It's interesting. So CTR Response, you register the name. What made you guys feel like, and how did you come to the conclusion that, all right, the way that we're going to be doing this is we're kind of like a boutique operation, but we need to hit above our weight class. And what made you guys, Clay, you probably might be the one that would be answer this one, but what was the aha moment where it was like, all right, we need to be registered with Google. We need to, and it kind of walked me through the building blocks of how you guys came to be that
Yeah. So thankfully in my role, I had a lot of information access to, or preliminary information access on where we needed to go. Like who had the best access that we needed to be a part of. We started first, honestly, with our data visualization partner. One of the sayings that I always had in my role as a sales manager was reporting is retention, which essentially meant that the more that you could visualize data and performance in front of a customer or a client, you were going to retain that client for longer because they could understand, they could visualize what their advertising was doing for them. So that was our first stop. We was picking our data visualization partner, somebody that could take our data, visualize it transparently for our clients, but visualize it transparently in a way that they could digest it. That was what was important for me, is that they could understand what they were looking at. Because a lot of the systems that we work within, the reporting can be very cumbersome. Not because it's poorly designed, but because there's so much information it's trying to translate back to its user. So having a data visualization partner allowed us to, put it in a very clean visual format, and also be able to minimize it down to this is what we care about and this is important. It was also important for us that it be customizable because some clients were a little more advanced than others. So they wanted to get more advanced in their reporting, which that system allowed us to do.
Okay.
So being able to have something that could speak to our clients very clearly was our number one priority at that point.
Being able to kind of speak in layman's terms.
Oh
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
hey, because I mean, the differentiators between all your clients, and I mean, you might have a guy who is younger and kind of understands and is kind of with it and has kind of a marketing mindset. And then might have a guy who's like in his mid to late 60s, 70s, who's like, I don't really know what I'm looking at, but can you explain it to me? That kind of thing. So,
Exactly. Yep.
well, so when was the company officially founded, and who was your first big client base?
The company was founded in September of 2020. Yeah, was registered. So we have formulated the company while we were still both working at the station, but we had already had our exit plans. So Clay was going to leave before me. I was going to leave a couple of months after, just to stagger it, obviously not be completely, suspicious about it. And Clay had a rock solid relationship with one of our, who's still a client today, a personal injury attorney in Mobile. And so we founded the business around that one client. And honestly, Andrew, because of those non-competes that we wanted to respect, right? So we knew that they were going to provide enough business that we could literally write out our non-compete and still obviously pay our bills, et cetera, before we decided that we were going to scale out. And so that got kicked off. Clay, you started in December of 2020 working directly with them and
Yeah.
waited for me to come in February.
That's
And
cool.
I will tell you that one surprising thing in all of this, though, is in that meantime, just so many people that reached out after I had left that I wanted so desperately to tell them, yeah, absolutely. Like I would gladly take you on as a client, blah, blah, blah. And having to having to tell them no in that time period was kind of hard. But I remember telling Ryan, it did give me a lot of positive feelings that they still held me in a very good regard.
Well, I mean, Clay,
That that was that
that
was
goes to show that like it's like Ryan said, like they're not whenever you're selling to someone, they're not necessarily buying what you're selling, they're buying you. And you could be in banking, you can be in off the street sales, food sales, whatever. If you have a rapport and you can get kind of close to your customer quickly and kind of like develop a relationship quickly, that's the skill set. And they don't care what you're selling. They want to do business with you, not what the product is, right? So that's just a compliment to you two guys.
my favorite story is that the personal injury attorney Ryan's referencing is when we finally told him what we were doing, which I mean, gosh, I wasn't sure how he was gonna take that information when we told him, but we finally told him. I'll never forget, he literally threw his hands down on the desk and said, "Oh, thank God, finally." And it was funny, like even we have always seen him as somewhat of a business mentor, and even he saw the writing on the wall too. And he flat out said after he said that, he's like, "I always knew y'all were going to do that." He's like, "I just had this feeling about both of you that y'all were eventually going to wisen up and own this yourself instead of letting somebody else own it for you." And
I mean, that's
that was
good. That's really good feedback.
I loved it. I loved every second of
Well,
it.
okay, so fast forward 5 years later, how is everything going? And let's talk a little bit about CTR's capabilities and what you kind of help companies do and kind of showcase some of that.
So, gosh, yeah, here we are 5 years later. And, like I mentioned before, we're still just in this huge innovation window. I mean, and I think anybody that listens to this will probably be impressed that we haven't said the letters AI yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's been an incredible ride. I think the growth of programmatic, especially in the video and connected television space, has just been incredible to witness. And our what we have learned and how far our skills have come as far as navigating that. And I'm trying not to be too technical because like I'm going to start throwing out words like DSP and things of that nature, and it's not going to be very layman's terms for anybody. But navigating these ad platforms and how now like the publishers of like Disney and Netflix and now us working almost directly with them and a platform, it's been interesting. It's funny looking back in time. I never would thought that I would have just regular access with a programmatic team at Disney that I email with on almost every other day. It's neat to say that we have those kind of relationships now. So that, I mean, gosh, Ryan, I mean, I'm not sure. Is there what else has surprised you over the last 5 years?
Well, I mean, from our capabilities, Andrew, kind of what you were talking about. I mean, we started with just, essentially three platforms. We were, obviously deep into the Meta business platform, Google Ads, obviously. So we started, primarily with lead generation tactics and perfecting that, right? And then, like Clay was talking about, connected television, we partnered with a demand side platform, which obviously is gives us the ability to trade media, if you will, or purchase media for our clients. From there, Clay has always been, looking for the next sharp tool in the toolbox, and I think that's what makes us unique, given our size is we have the same purchasing power as, billion-dollar advertising agencies. We get to play in the same arena. What also comes with that is the technology that we use. We're always trying to stay on the forefront of whatever digital ad tech that's out there that our clients can benefit from. And so, we went from just, placing and purchasing and setting up lead generation campaigns to morphing into setting up automation so that, the leads that we are collecting are being pushed into a client CRM system, and helping them navigate their own first party data. So I would say there isn't a digital advertising solution that CTR can achieve or execute. That's just the name of the game, is how can we bring the same tactics and strategies that Fortune 500 companies are doing? How can we bring that to the small to medium sized businesses, right? Because I think that there's this illusion that, General Motors or, all the major brands have this secret sauce and, they're able to only use specific tools because of the size. And that's not the case. And that's what
No,
we quickly figured out is
definitely not.
yeah. And that's what we quickly figured out is how can we, take those same technologies that they're using and bring it to a local level for businesses.
Well, I think that it's a really, really cool concept. And for the listener, it is true. We use CTR here at Allen Beverages, and we have been very happy with the results. I can take a look at what actually is working, what is not working. You can make tweaks. Let's say like you feel like a campaign's not being kind of not executing at the level that you want. You can make a tweak, and then you can see in real time whether or not that tweak works. So I mean, I definitely think that the concept of a low overhead, high output digital solution is what you guys are executing, and you're doing a good job at it. And being able to and kind of fight above your weight class and basically execute the same way that larger big advertising companies are without the overhead is a service that this area needs, honestly, because a lot of times digital advertising has way too much margin on the overhead side. So, you're paying for the same thing that you would pay probably pennies on the dollar for. You're paying a lot more for. So I think it's a very niche segment that you were smart to get into, and then with just your capabilities as far as technical savvy and selling, it's working out.
Yeah, we're super blessed. There's a lot of luck, Andrew, as you know, in business to be successful. There's a lot of luck involved, and having met Clay and how all the pieces came together. There's no question that there was a good bit of luck that happened. But you combine that with Clay's technical side and my business side, and yeah, we're extremely happy of where we're at and where we're going.
Well, I want to ask where if anybody who's listening to this once is thinking, of even like I don't like a lot of people seem to be afraid of marketing and advertising because they look at it as an expense that does not, it doesn't pay off. They look at it as I'm just kind of throwing money away. Some people understand it and know that, listen, you got to get your name out there, especially in this day and age of, Google searches and that kind of thing. Like if you aren't doing at least Google AdWords, like you're going to need a little help. So if someone was to want to contact you guys and maybe set up a meeting or have a conversation with you all about possibly you helping their business, where would they go?
Yeah, the best place, I mean, we have a form, we have a website out there, ctrresponse.com. We have a pretty detailed form on there that asks a lot of good preliminary questions that really kind of help us start the conversation with somebody. And to anybody that's, listening and wanting to reach out and learn, one motto that I have had forever, and I think it's actually on my LinkedIn profile as my motto or saying on there is, we have always believed in education before implementation. So even if it's something to where if somebody just wants to open up a conversation about, I don't know if I need this, and I honestly have no idea what I'm doing. I'll be quite honest with you. It's Ryan probably rolls his eyes every time I say this because it's probably terrible business practice, but our time is free. I mean, if you want to call and start a conversation about who you are, what you're doing, and what you should be doing, glad to have that conversation. I think that's one thing that has been has been a bad thing in our industry is that people aren't very good about educating clients about what digital is and what it isn't and what it could be. That's why we always seek out to educate before we implement. I mean, it's just good business practice. We want to know what you're buying, why you're buying it, so you can go home at night and tell your dog or your spouse, "Hey, I talked about this today with Clay and Ryan. This is why we're doing it, and this is what we're going to be able to achieve with it." If you can't answer those questions when you go home at night, then we have missed a we have missed a large step of this whole process. So yeah, our website's the best place to get us to us, and like I said, free conversation is free. So
Cool. Well, listen, Ryan, Clay, once again, I really enjoy the conversations that we have. I really think that you guys coming together and creating something to not only be successful for yourselves, but also to kind of help local businesses find the advertising digitally that they need. I think it's a great thing. So I commend you guys on taking that leap of faith and going out, especially during the 2020 pandemic when, there was a lot of uncertainty out in the world, so y'all basically took a leap of faith, and here we are 5-6 years later, and it's paying off. And I thank you guys for all the help that you help us with. And, just look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the future and what new tools we can utilize to try to keep pushing digitally out there.
Absolutely.
So once again, guys, I appreciate the time and the conversation, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
absolutely, man. Thank you for having us, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
That's a wrap on another fantastic episode of Bottled Up. I want to give a massive shout out to Ryan Meisch and Clay Tyler for coming on today and opening up about their journey of building CTR Response from the ground up. What really stood out was the magic that happens when you pair sharp business instincts with deep technical know-how. That's a powerful recipe for success. We also dove into how digital advertising has evolved and why standing out now comes down to total transparency, smart data use, and staying nimble in a fast-moving space. And perhaps most importantly, they hammered home that real success starts with education, making sure clients fully get the why behind every strategy before diving in, so that the results actually mean something. If you're ready to take your business's digital game to the next level, or even if you're just curious about what's possible in today's landscape, I cannot recommend CTR Response enough. Head over to ctrresponse.com, reach out to Ryan or Clay, and start the conversation. They are genuinely passionate about helping folks understand and win in this space. For Bottled Up, I'm Andrew Allen. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and I appreciate you being here. And until next time, remember to always support local businesses, restaurants, events, and attractions. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Bottled Up Podcast. Want us to deliver this show to your email inbox as they drop? Want to tell us about how you like the show? Or do you want to tell us about a Gulf Coast business or restaurant that you'd like for us to spotlight in any upcoming episodes? Email Ashton McEwen at abevinc.com. That's AMCKEOWN at ABEVINC.com. That's ABEVINC.com. Want to know more about Allen Beverages and how we work with our clients, partners, and vendors? Check out allenbeverages.com. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Gwynn and Deep Fried Studios.